computer. Okay. Hi, my name's Bob Whipple, and I'm also called the Trust Ambassador. I'm here today with Stephen M.R. Covey, who is a friend of mine. We've been friends for about maybe a dozen years since we both write and speak in the area of trust. We've gotten to know each other pretty well over the years and worked well together. So I've asked him to come today because I've got some information that I think he has to share that will be quite interesting to everyone. So Stephen is, I think, in my opinion, and a lot of other people believe too, that Stephen is the furthest point north in the in terms of fame and people know him and know the name. He's the son of Stephen R. Covey, who's the famous author of The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Unfortunately, Stephen died a few years ago. So, but he was a great man and raised a great child. So Stephen has written 2 books on trust. The first one is probably the more well-known, The Speed of Trust. I think that came out in 2008, was it? Something like that?
Yeah, actually 2006, and then I just did an updated edition in 2018.
Oh, okay. And then he also wrote a really interesting book that I've enjoyed quite a bit called Smart Trust, that kind of delves into the area of trust in a slightly different way. So he's really contributed a whole lot over the years to the trust community. And we both belong to an organization called Trust Across America, Trust Around the World. You may have heard of Barbara Kimmel. She runs an organization there. And there's a subset of that group called the Trust Alliance. And Stephen and I are both members of the Trust Alliance. And actually, we're both Lifetime Achievement Award winners for top thought leaders in trust. So we belong to the same club, I guess. And we were having a Zoom meeting about a couple of weeks ago, and Stephen was introducing some thoughts relative to trust in this environment of the COVID-19 disaster that's going on, that I thought were quite interesting and that I had not thought of before. So I thought it'd be useful to have him kind of describe his thoughtware there. So Stephen, take it away.
All right. Well, wonderful. It's great to be with everybody at this virtual meeting for Rochester Disrupt HR. I'm delighted, and I appreciate my friend Bob. As he mentioned, we go back many years, and we're working in the same space. And they don't call him the Trust Ambassador for no reason. It's because he knows this topic in and out and is a real expert. So I'm honored to be here with him. And the thought I have as it relates to trust in our current environment is simply this: that I like the idea of a trust account that people have between each other. A balance of trust in the relationship. Even companies may have a trust account, a balance of trust with their team, with their employees, with their people. And just like a financial bank account, when you make a deposit, it goes up. When you take a withdrawal, it goes down. If you take too many withdrawals or too big a withdrawal, you're overdrawn. There's insufficient money in a financial bank account. There's insufficient trust in a trust account. So the idea of a trust account is very relevant for our times today, because the premise is this: is that if before this pandemic has hit us, if our starting point to begin with was that we had built a high trust team, a high trust culture, high trust relationships. In other words, if the trust account was high, as we have gone into the pandemic, it remains high. In fact, I would even argue it's even amplified. And as a starting point, it becomes even higher because of the circumstances around us. And I think it works the other direction as well. If the trust account or the balance of trust in the relationship and the culture was low to begin with, or even overdrawn, as you go into this new environment with all this disruption and this crisis and chaos and uncertainty, that it stays low. It starts at a low place and maybe even is amplified downward.
Yeah.
And so this principle of amplification in either direction is kind of a starting point. But Bob, as you know, as we talked about, that's not the ending point. So that's just maybe a starting point of starting with a level of trust. Maybe it's if it was high before, it's going to be high going into this. If it was low before, it will be low going into it. Maybe even amplified in either direction as a starting point.
So that's something that leaders are going to have to work their way through, regardless of the circumstances. And there's a lot that leaders can do during the hiatus that affect that, right?
Right, and that's the opportunity. That's why I say it's the starting point, because how we navigate through this crisis, how we do what we do, can actually impact the level of trust. And we can, again, amplify it even higher and reverse the negative trend if the trust was low by our explicit, intentional efforts to build trust. And maybe the most significant thing that we can do during a time of crisis as leaders is to communicate, communicate, and communicate, much more than normal, and to be intentional about our communication, and to be open about it, to be transparent, to talk straight so that people know when we say something, we're telling the truth. They don't have to read things into it or kind of, cut down the spin. No, they know that we tell the truth. And the whole idea is that people may not always like what they hear, but they learn that they can trust what they hear because we're honest, we're authentic, we're straightforward. Yeah. And when you have that kind of communication, so a lot of communication, and then the quality of the communication is direct, it's open and transparent, and we're also kind of addressing the real issues. We're not skirting them or evading them. We're dealing with real things. That shows that you trust your people. Yep. And they're able to handle even the tough news. And
how you communicate will impact first of all, they'll see the effort. As it takes effort to communicate. I used to, when I was in manufacturing, I always kind of observed an interesting phenomenon when things were kind of dicey and people were worried or people were upset about something. And there were rumors going around or maybe potential layoffs or, people were unsettled. I observed that the leaders tended to want to hide in their offices. They would go in and get on their computer and type away and try to shield themselves because they didn't want to have to answer questions out there that were tough to answer. And I always advocated exactly. I said, if things are dicey out on the shop floor, you need to at least double the amount of communication that you're doing. You need to resist the temptation to hide and get out there and interface with people. Tell the truth. Don't BS people. And I think that's the same situation that's going on here.
You're exactly right, Bob. It's the same situation especially because of what's happening and the uncertainty out there. If we don't communicate, if we stay in our office and hide because we don't have answers, people will bring their own meaning to it. Yeah. They'll project into it. Yeah. They'll come up with their own interpretation of it. And they also will wonder, do they know what's going on? And if they feel like they don't know what's going on, that's not a good thing. Or they might feel like they do know what's going on and don't want to tell us. Yeah. And that's not a good thing.
That's not a good thing for trust. No?
That's right. The more you can be open and transparent, saying, here's what we know, here's what we don't know. And that's, you're being vulnerable in doing that, but you're honest, you're authentic, you're real. And here's how we're going to try to learn about what we don't know and how we'll communicate it to you when we do know. It just shows that we're real. There's nothing to hide here. We're in this together. We're authentic about it. And you can trust us as the source to talk straight to you and to give you the news, both the good and the bad. And that's just a better place to be because then you keep the currency of trust strong. Yeah. And that's where you can, if you go in high to begin with, you'll amplify it higher and higher. If you went in low, here maybe is an opportunity to say, look, we want to re-engage with our workforce. We're going to try harder. And we're going to, like you say, it's hard work to communicate. Mm-hmm. We're going to try to communicate, but it's not just that we're going to try to say things. We're going to try to be as open and as transparent and as authentic, as well as straightforward and honest as we can, so that that we can build an increased level of trust. And, you know, you can't talk yourself out of a problem you behaved yourself into. So we've got low trust to begin with. The only way we're going to get it back is to behave our way back into trust. But we could do that by how we communicate. So,
Right.
you know, the answer is to communicate, but it's how we communicate that also matters.
Yeah.
That makes all the difference.
Yeah. I just really like that theory. I can really relate to it. I've been on some calls with various CEOs here in Rochester that I have great respect for. Lauren Dixon wrote an article in the Rochester Business Journal that came out last Friday that was just awesome about, and she said, trust rules. and
Absolutely.
and so I really appreciate your sharing those insights with us, Stephen. I know you're a busy guy and I don't want to hold you up, but I do appreciate you taking the time to chat with me about this, and we'll pass it on and have some interesting discussions about that, and I'll pass back what other people were saying. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Well, thank you, Bob. Maybe the only thing I would add
Okay.
is that, you know, I love what Lauren wrote about trust rules because it does. And I like to say that trust is the new currency of our world today. That was true before this pandemic. I think it's even more true during the pandemic,
Yeah.
during a crisis, during disruption, to know where you can have trust and where you can have confidence, even if they don't have the answers yet, to know that you're going to hear it straight,
Yeah.
where they're coming from. That is the ultimate currency. And for a leader, you're the foundation of that. The greatest asset is your credibility. The greatest currency is the trust that people have in you. And the greatest power that we have as leaders is our ability to extend that trust to others. And so what I would say for our leaders is that right now, especially, in addition to communicating well and frequently and openly and honestly, there's a great opportunity also to intentionally extend trust to our people, to declare that we trust them, to show that we trust them. So not just say it, but do it. Because right now there's a lot of remote work going on.
Yep.
And you could have remote work going on and not trust your people and just hover over them. Or you could say, now's the time to say, you know what? We can trust, and we can have clear expectations and accountability on what we're trying to do. And we can intentionally extend trust and tell your people that you trust them. And what you do right now during a time of crisis will again have that amplification factor as it comes back to you.
Yep.
It will be multiplied. So right now is a great opportunity to increase our ability to build trust with our teammates.
That's great. And I think that when we get back, everybody's talking about get back to normal. We're never going to get back to where we were. We're going to be in a different place. And that's going to be the ultimate leadership challenge when folks begin to get back to the workplace. It's our actions and how we handle that that's going to affect that amplification as well, right?
Absolutely. I would just put it this way. How we do what we do makes all the difference, because trust is built through that consistent behavior. As you know, and you teach so well, Bob, in your work, and I do the same in mine, we have to behave our way into trust, just like you can behave your way out of it.
Yep.
But we can become deliberate about this and intentional. And that's the invitation I would give to all our leaders today, is that the stakes are higher and the opportunity is higher to have greater impact by being intentional and deliberate about building trust on purpose. You know, through your credibility, through your caring for people. Right now, caring is so important. And then you demonstrate that with this communication, the frequent communication, and the open, authentic, straightforward communication, and the extension of trust. And you can behave your way into greater trust, even coming out of a pandemic, maybe especially coming out of a difficult time like right now. So I think that is our opportunity. It's also our challenge, because none of this is easy.
Yep. Oh, that's great. Thank you so much for sharing that. I really appreciate it. I know there's a lot of people here in Rochester and probably other cities that'll appreciate it as well. So thanks very much for spending the time with me, Stephen, and we'll talk to you later.
You're welcome. It's always great to be with you, my friend, Bob.
Okay.
Thank you so much.